Welcome to our community. Susie Thomas here with you this morning, visiting with a longtime friend, Joe Vitale Jr. Good morning.
Good morning. How's it going?
It's going great. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us. Let's start out with the fact that I've known you since you were a very young boy, and you had an interesting upbringing with a dad who had an unusual job. Tell us a little bit about growing up in the home of Joe Vitale, who is the drummer.
It was, a lot of people have asked me this, and I always tell them it always felt normal to me because it's all I ever knew. My dad would go on the road for several weeks at a time, and I used to tell people it's basically the same as everyone else's dad that goes to the office for work, but I go, he just goes for 6 weeks at a time. For me, it was obviously I missed my dad when he was gone, but it was one of those things where I understood very early on what he did and that you had to be gone and stuff. So for me, I enjoyed the heck out of my growing up because, going on the road, I didn't start going on the real road until about 10 years old. I would go to some shows here and there if they were close by. But my parents in 1987 took me on the road for the first time. I was, riding, and I'd never left the state before, and it was exciting and this whole new thing. And to see, all the behind the scenes goings on at shows, it was just an absolute amazing childhood as well as education, because being what I do now, because back then from age about 10 to about middle of high school, I wanted to be an astronaut, and then
that's what I remember.
Yeah, my nickname in Jackson Middle School was Space Boy or NASA Boy. I had that for years.
NASA Boy.
And then I started getting into music. My parents never pushed me into music.
No.
It was they let me kind of decide what I wanted to do. If I wanted to go into aeronautical engineering, which is what I wanted to do at like age 11, they were totally behind it. So when I was 10, I got to play on stage with Crosby, Stills, and Nash at Blossom Music Center. And Blossom still holds a very, because of that particular time, is a very special place in my heart. And when I went out there, and mind you, I just had a tambourine. I don't even think I was mic'd up. I was scared of screwing the band up. I was so nervous, but I was so excited about it. When I walked out and I saw the people and everyone screaming and stuff, and everyone really I was like, oh, this is a lot more fun. So I got into music. I started playing drums age 12. I started learning to play. And then through high school, I played obviously drums, and drums are my main instrument. But growing up also, my dad had the kind of intuitive knowledge to have somebody else teach me drums. He always obviously would show me something if I asked him, but he had Phil Zampino, who had Zampino's drum shop in Canton. He taught me, and my dad had taught him, so he knew it was going to be a good education from there. And so I learned indirectly from my dad how to play drums, but it was very unique childhood. I grew up. My mom was always was an artist, photographer, videographer. My dad was a musician, so I had a very artistic upbringing and stuff.
Yeah, and I love the fact that they decided specifically to raise you here in Stark County. Your dad's colleagues, children of your dad's colleagues, work colleagues like Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Right.
Yeah, Dan Fogelberg, Joe Walsh, all of the Eagles, etc. Their kids were all being raised out in probably L.A.
out in Colorado, various, a lot of different places, San Francisco. And my parents, specifically, they went out looking for a house at one point. My parents went out looking to see if they could find a house in L.A. when Dad was first, and they both kind of came to the conclusion that one, it was even then it was incredibly expensive out there, and two, my parents wanted me to have a stable upbringing and so forth, and really good values. And my parents always have instilled in me good work ethic, morals, my faith, everything that makes me who I am from this area, essentially. So I was really happy that I grew up here, too, because honestly, all my friends that I have always surrounded myself with really good friends. Up until I met Kathy, things could have gone either way with some of the relationships
I had.
Kathy?
Yeah.
Yeah, but once I met Kathy, like meeting Kathy, all my best friends here, that was all from, growing up here. And if any one, stepping stone along the way had been different, I wouldn't have had the friends or my wife. And so I look at it like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.
Yeah. You are performing every once in a while at Lock 3, I know. Do you have any of those coming up?
Yes, I'm playing this summer. I've taken a little bit of time off this year. I'm working on a new record as well, some other projects, and some other, I'm directing some videos and some producing some other artists. But I have a show coming up on August 26th at Lock 3, and I have some guest stars, a couple new faces. I have Neil Zaza going to be playing guitar with me. He's right now he's over in I think he's in Singapore at the moment actually, and I also work at his studio, the Audio Kitchen in Akron. So I do a lot of work for him, and he's a great, absolutely wonderful man to work for and stuff. And we have a great time and stuff. So he's going to be playing with me. I have guys from Boku going to be playing with me, a couple guys I played with last year. Just a whole wonderful mix. It's going to be the largest kind of version of my band. It'll be 7 of us on stage.
So exciting.
That's coming on August 26th. We're opening up for Zozo, which is a Led Zeppelin tribute group. And it seems like I'm the opening act for them every time they come to Northeast Ohio. So like every time wherever they play, I end up being their opening act. So we've gotten to know them over the years and stuff, and they're really great guys.
There are worse people to be an opening act for.
Yeah,
That's
I know.
Really exciting. Yeah.
It's cool.
Very cool. So August 26th at Lock 3, and it'll be the Joe Vitale
Junior Band. Yeah, at this stage, yes.
Okay. We do not. What time does that get started, Joe?
Okay, that's the thing I'm trying to remember. Okay, I know that Zozo goes on around like 8:30 your night, so I think we're on at 7 that night. It's either 6 o'clock or 7, and I'm not exactly sure because every year it kind of alternates a little bit, but we play for an hour, so I'm assuming it's on at 7 o'clock that night.
How exciting. Is there a website, to get information about?
If you go to I think it's lock3live.com if I remember correctly. It could be off that, but if you also go to just type in Lock 3 into Google, and also the Akron Civic, they're connected, so they have all the schedule up.
You mentioned multi-instrumentalist. You might not have mentioned that, but you mentioned that you play a lot of different instruments, drum being one of them.
Yes.
What took you around to all the different instruments that you're interested in playing, that you are so skilled at playing? How did that happen?
Well, one, I'm hyperactive, and I have a constant just thirst for learning new things. I'm kind of like a sponge for information. So I'm always like, no matter what I kind of direct myself at, I try to absorb all that. Like if I'm learning something like in construction, I'll absorb everything that has to do with that. So when it came to musical instruments, growing up, obviously drums is my primary instrument. But then around 1992, my parents for Christmas got me one of those little Tascam little Porta Studio things. It's 8-track recorder. So my dad had an old DX7 he gave me, which ironically is for sale now over at Catuzza's. It had gone through all this cycle of things. It just reappeared over there, and it has still our handwriting on it, which is pretty cool.
That's cool.
But my parents gave me a keyboard, so I started learning to play keyboard and started learning how to write songs. Because at that stage, I had no idea how to write songs. I just was, just play drums. That's all I did. So I started learning that. And then I realized about midway through high school that really the front guy is the main guy in a band. I knew I wanted, even at that stage, I wanted to be the main guy. So I started learning guitar because I'm like, it's hard to be the front guy and be on drums. I mean, there's some guys that do that. I mean, Don Henley does that in a sense, but
Karen Carpenter did.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a mixture of guys that do that. But it's a lot more difficult, and also singing and trying to play drums is really difficult because you're using up all your oxygen playing, and then you have to sing on top of that, and then you're crunching your diaphragm. So it's a whole mix of mess of stuff trying to. So I started learning guitar, and then after that, I started picking up steel drum and a whole bunch of other instruments now. So I basically, they refer to me as a utility guy. So if I go into any band, they can move me to any place on the stage essentially, and I can some better than others, but I can move me pretty much to any instrument, and I can at least perform adequately on certain areas. Like, for example, I can play bass, but I never consider myself a bass player. So, but I can move around. I can still play that sort of stuff. So anytime with a group, you get like 8 or 10 musicians out of me from that.
Nice place to be as well. You're very marketable. Well, and it's also kind of fun, and we're speaking with Joe Vitale Jr., kind of fun to hear you play with your dad. If we're doing Rocky Mountain Way, you can certainly do the drum part of that, but you kind of allow him to do the drum part of that when he's playing with you.
Exactly.
And you play guitar or something. And how do you relate to the oldies, to the classic rock, more like that your dad plays? And then you also somehow seamlessly transition into your own, much more edgy, more today sound.
Well, growing up, I obviously grew up around my dad playing with, Crosby, Stills, Nash and Joe Walsh primarily, and then CSN during the late 80s and early 90s. I listened to back then when I was playing drums, all I listened to was live tapes of my dad playing with these groups. And that's how I learned to play outside of my lessons. I would, literally learn every fill my dad would play. And so for me, my favorite drummer has always been my dad, being a little biased, but still, learned all those songs from that. And so I listened to that nonstop. And it makes an imprint on you. And when I first started writing music, all the stuff I originally had written was all Latin-based. It was all calypso, very islandy. So I literally spent the first, I'd say about 6 or 7 years writing primarily calypso, kind of Jimmy Buffett style kind of music. And then from that, though, I started getting into I started, obviously in high school you listen to, whatever is out and stuff like that. And I never was really super into whatever was out at the time. I was still listening to classic rock. But there's a few groups like Lenny Kravitz I'd listen to and stuff. And so I started to combine those elements and start, listening to some like heavier electronic stuff. And so combining those into it sort of over time kind of conglomerated into what I do. And so I like having the mixture of classic rock sound, but then, like you say, giving it a little bit more edgy, synth sound to it and sequencers and so forth. I write what excites me. So like when I'm listening to my own music, if I don't get excited while I'm playing it, it gets put on the shelf. Not that I haven't written a couple like ballads and stuff that aren't fun and laid back, but when I'm playing stuff like my one song I have called "Fighter to Self-Destruct," that song is a lot of meaning behind it. My albums and music that I write is very autobiographical, and there's some relationship songs there too. But there's a lot of my message, as all musicians have some sort of message they're always trying to use. Mine's always been triumph over adversity, and I combine my faith in there. So while my records are considered secular, most of the music, at least half of any record, is biblically based, if not more so. So it's I tried to marry all those elements. So one, it gives really great sounding rock music. It's heavier by nature, but I try to make it where it's something that everybody can listen to and have fun. And it's not like some of the guys out there just scream, and that's great, but that's not what I do.
How would you describe your music if you were to pigeonhole it in some way?
Probably the best way I could describe it is like, that's actually tough. I used to refer to it as industrial classic rock, but now I more or less kind of coin it as just industrial rock in that sense. So you have like the synthesizers and some cool percussive elements to it, because I still take a lot from my drumming background. So I would probably have to call it like industrial rock. It would be the best way to classify it. Even for myself, it's hard to sometimes classify it exactly. But the more I've looked into it, because I've been looking into a lot of like different marketing techniques and stuff. And so it says, find your micro niche or niche. And so I'm like, oh, well, that's essentially what I do. So that's basically what I would call it.
That's perfect. We are visiting with Joe Vitale Jr. He is going to be August 26th at Lock 3. Get that on your radar, because that's going to be a very fun night. And Joe, where can we go to get your any of your albums or to listen to your music? Tell us about your website.
Go to joevitalejr.com. That's JoeVitalejr.com. Or you can look me up on Facebook, facebook.com/Joe Vitale Jr. Official.
Perfect. All right. We're going to be back after these words. Going to find out a little bit more about what makes you tick, because you mentioned that faith is such a big part. Even though your music would be considered secular, it's a huge part of your message. We'll be back after these words. You're listening to Our Community.